After flying across the country to surprise my husband on his birthday, I walked in with a gift and overheard him tell his brother he wished I'd disappear forever so he could cash in my life insurance. I'm Scarlett, 33, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I had a pretty good marriage. My husband Mason, 31, and I had been married for 7 years, high school sweethearts who broke up for college, then reconnected at a friend's wedding. The rest was history. Or so I thought. Things hadn't been great lately. Mason had become increasingly distant over the past 6 months. Around the same time, he started hanging out more with his brother Jackson and this new group of friends. They all seemed to drive cars they couldn't afford and take vacations on credit cards. Not judging, just noticing. Mason started making comments about our house being just a starter home and asking when I was going to level up career-wise. I chalked it up to a phase. We lived comfortably, a nice 3-bedroom in a good neighborhood, 2 decent cars, yearly vacation. Nothing fancy, but we were doing fine, or I thought we were. February birthdays suck in the Midwest. Always cold, often snowy, plans get canceled. Mason's birthday fell on a Tuesday this year, but he'd mentioned wanting to visit his brother that weekend since they had plans to go to some sports event on Saturday. I told him I couldn't get away from work and would have to stay behind. That was a lie. I'd actually arranged to take Friday off. The plan, surprise him by showing up at Jackson's place Friday evening with his favorite cake from this bakery near our house, then take him out for a fancy dinner I'd already booked. I'd even packed a bag with his favorite clothes. I had it all worked out. Weather reports started looking sketchy Thursday night. Severe thunderstorm warnings across 3 states, including the entire route I needed to fly. Most people would have canceled. I didn't. Partly stubborn determination, partly not wanting to waste the reservation at the restaurant that took me 3 weeks to get. I left at 7:00 a.m. Friday. What should have been a 3-hour direct flight turned into a 9-hour nightmare. 2 delays on the tarmac, 1 emergency landing in a city I'd never even heard of due to lightning, and finally a connection through Denver that got me there hours later than planned. White-knuckle turbulence through storms so violent the flight attendant spilled coffee on the man across the aisle. 3 different planes, each one seemingly more determined than the last to test my fear of flying. But I kept thinking about Mason's face when I'd walk through the door. Worth it, right? I got to Jackson's neighborhood around 4:00 p.m., had to have the Uber drop me a block away because there was construction blocking the street. Grabbed the cake box and trudged through puddles, my flat soaked by the time I got to Jackson's front door. The door was unlocked. I could hear them in the kitchen, voices and laughter. I was about to call out when I heard my name. Mason was mid-sentence. "From Scarlett? Nothing. Radio silence." Jackson said something I couldn't make out. Then Mason again, clearer. "She texted earlier saying she was stuck at work, probably still there." "In this weather, they'd have sent everyone home," Jackson replied. "Well, she's probably on the couch with her headphones on, watching that stupid cooking show again." I froze in the entryway. This wasn't the usual playful eye-rolling about my Netflix habits. There was real contempt in his voice. "At least she's not here ruining your birthday weekend," Jackson said. I almost stepped in then to announce myself. Wish I had. Instead, I heard what came next. "God, can you imagine?" Mason laughed. "She'd insist on coming to dinner with us tonight and tell the same 3 stories she always tells. Then she'd get that sad puppy look when I want to go out tomorrow without her." My stomach knotted. I stood there holding this stupid cake I'd flown 9 hours through thunderstorms to deliver, listening to my husband mock me to his brother. "Well, at least she's safely out of the way," Jackson said. "The flights are a disaster. My friend's wife got stuck on a layover for 5 hours." There was a pause. Then Mason said something I'll never forget. "God, I hope her plane crashes. I could use the insurance." I must have made a noise because they both got quiet. I thought I'd been caught. But then Jackson responded. "Or at least a few months of silence?" They both laughed. Actual laughter at the thought of me dead or hospitalized. I don't remember consciously deciding what to do next. I just walked into the kitchen, placed the cake box on the counter, and walked back out. Their faces. I've never seen color drain from someone's face so fast in real life. Mason called my name, but I just kept walking back through the rain, back to the street where I could call another Uber. I sat in the back of the car for maybe 20 minutes before I could even give the driver a destination. My phone blew up. 17 missed calls by the time I checked, 38 text messages. I read exactly none of them. I drove to the nearest hotel. Cost me $180 for a room that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Turned off my phone and stared at the ceiling until sunrise. When I did turn my phone back on, there were 63 texts and 29 missed calls. I didn't read them. Just texted my friend Lily. Something happened with Mason. Need a place to crash for a few days. Lily, being the MVP she is, just replied, "Doors unlocked, wine's in the fridge." I flew the 3 hours back home, packed 3 suitcases of clothes and essentials while Mason was still at Jackson's. Grabbed my important documents from our fireproof box and went to Lily's. That was 3 days ago. I still haven't spoken to Mason, though not for his lack of trying. He's called from multiple numbers, left voicemails ranging from tearful to angry, and even showed up at my workplace yesterday. I wasn't there, called in sick. Today, I went to the bank and moved half our joint savings into a new account in just my name, froze our joint credit cards, changed all my passwords, told my boss I needed to work remotely for a week due to a family emergency. It's all very methodical, which is weird because inside I feel like I'm in freefall. The thing is, I keep replaying those words. I hope her plane crashes. I could use the insurance. Who says that about someone they're supposed to love? Who laughs about their spouse being silenced for months? Even worse is realizing this probably isn't the first time he said something like this, just the first time I heard it. Our friends have started reaching out. Apparently, Mason's telling people we had a misunderstanding, and I'm overreacting. Classic gaslighting move. One mutual friend texted saying, "Whatever happened, I'm sure you guys can work through it," without even asking for my side. I haven't told anyone what I heard. Not even Lily knows the full story, though she hasn't pushed. She just keeps the wine stocked and gives me space. Last night, I finally read some of Mason's texts. They follow a predictable pattern. Confusion. Where did you go? Why did you leave? Defensiveness. It was just a joke. You weren't supposed to hear that. Anger. You're being childish. Answer your damn phone. Manipulation. I'm worried about you. Please let me know you're okay. Threats. If you don't call me back, I'm calling the police to report you missing. Self-pity. I can't believe you'd do this to me on my birthday weekend. Not one genuine apology. Not one acknowledgement of how messed up what he said was. After reading those, I blocked his number. I'm not ready to talk to him. Maybe I never will be. Today, I met with a financial advisor named Ethan who a coworker recommended. Spent 2 hours going through our finances. Found out some interesting things, like how Mason's been spending $1,800 a month on online gaming and electronics for the past year. Or how he took out a store credit card I didn't know about with a $3,000 balance. Ethan helped me make a plan to disentangle our finances as painlessly as possible. It's all legal, nothing shady, but it means Mason's about to get a reality check about his spending habits. The joint account I left untouched has enough for this month's mortgage and utilities. After that, we'll see. I'm not trying to leave him destitute. I just need him to understand there are consequences. The wild thing is, I still catch myself wondering if I'm overreacting, like maybe it really was just a joke. But then I remember his tone, the casualness of wishing me dead, the laughter after. And I know I'm not. Lily says I should talk to him, if only to get closure. Maybe she's right. But right now, I'm still processing, still trying to figure out who this person I married actually is. Tomorrow marks 4 days of silence from my end. Mason's brother Jackson tried to call today. I didn't answer. Then our neighbor Caroline texted saying, "Mason was at our house crying on your front step because you changed the garage door code." Part of me feels bad. Most of me doesn't. My first night at the motel was the longest of my life. I kept replaying Mason's words in my head, trying to find some interpretation that wasn't horrifying. There wasn't one. By morning, I'd made a decision. I needed to protect myself first, emotionally and financially. Lily's guest room became my sanctuary. She asked no questions, just handed me a spare key and cleared a shelf in her bathroom. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "The cat might judge you, but I won't." I called in sick to work for 3 days, using the time to move essentials from our house when I knew Mason would be at work. Photo albums, my grandmother's jewelry, important paperwork, things I couldn't bear to lose if this got ugly. I left most of our shared possessions untouched. They were just things. Mason's texts grew increasingly desperate. The final one read, "I'm coming home early. We need to talk. Please be there." I made sure I wasn't. On day 5, I discovered something that made my stomach drop. While gathering tax documents from our home office, I found statements for a life insurance policy I didn't know existed. Mason had taken it out 8 months ago, $750,000 on me with him as the sole beneficiary. The policy date coincided exactly with when he started becoming distant. I photographed everything and took the documents with me. That night, Mason showed up at Lily's. I watched through the blinds as she intercepted him on the porch. I couldn't hear what was said, but his face was red, gesturing wildly while she stood with arms crossed. After 15 minutes, he left. Lily came back inside. "He says you're having a mental breakdown," she reported. "Says you misunderstood a joke and now you're punishing him." "Did he tell you what the joke was?" I asked. "No, just that it was taken out of context." I still wasn't ready to share what I'd heard. Saying it out loud would make it real in a way I wasn't prepared for. The next day, I met with a lawyer named Diana. She listened to my story without judgment, then laid out my options: separation, divorce, financial protection. She also suggested documenting everything. "Start a journal," she advised. "Write down what happened, when it happened, and how you felt. Include dates, times, witnesses if any. It helps to have a record if this escalates." I started the journal that night. The first entry was 9 pages long. By the end of the first week, Mason had enlisted his parents to reach out. His mother called, tearfully asking what was wrong with her sweet boy. I couldn't bring myself to tell her what he'd said. Instead, I simply told her we were having problems and needed space. "But you two were perfect together," she insisted. "Whatever it is, I'm sure you can work it out." Perfect. That word haunted me. We had seemed perfect, hadn't we? The high school sweethearts who found each other again. The couple who never fought in public. The pair who finished each other's sentences at dinner parties. All a carefully constructed facade, apparently. I returned to work after a week, though I arranged to work remotely 3 days a week. My boss was surprisingly understanding. "Family emergencies happen," she said. "Just keep me updated." Mason tried showing up at my office again. Security turned him away. On day 10, I finally answered a call from Jackson, Mason's brother. I expected defensiveness or anger. Instead, he sounded uncomfortable. "Look," he said, "I don't know exactly what's going on between you two, but I'm sorry if something I said or did contributed to this." I remained silent. "Mason's a mess," he continued. "He won't tell me what happened, just that you left." "Ask him what he said about me at your house," I replied, then hung up. That night, I dreamed Mason was chasing me through an airport. I woke up in a cold sweat, wondering how I could have been so wrong about someone I thought I knew completely. 2 weeks into my self-imposed exile, I finally agreed to meet Mason. Not at our house or a private place, at a coffee shop downtown, busy enough for witnesses but quiet enough for a conversation. I arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table in the corner with my back to the wall, and ordered a latte I had no intention of drinking. My stomach was in knots. Mason walked in 5 minutes late. He looked terrible. Unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, wearing a wrinkled shirt I recognized as one he'd had since college. For a split second, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered why we were here. "Scarlett," he said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Thank God. I've been going crazy." I said nothing, just watched him. He fidgeted with a napkin, tearing it into tiny pieces. "Can you please say something?" he finally asked. "I heard what you said at Jackson's," I replied, keeping my voice low and steady. "About hoping my plane would crash for the insurance money." He flinched. "It was a stupid joke. I didn't mean it." "Jokes are supposed to be funny, Mason. Wishing your wife dead isn't funny." I know. It was horrible. I was just showing off for Jackson. You know how he is, always making these dark jokes. I was trying to one-up him. I took out my phone, pulled up a photo of the life insurance policy, and slid it across the table. "Is that why you took out a $750,000 policy on me 8 months ago without telling me?" His face went pale. It's not what you think." "Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been fantasizing about cashing in on my death." "It was financial planning. We both should have policies. I was going to get one for myself, too." "But you didn't, did you? I checked. Just me." He ran his hands through his hair. "This is insane. You're acting like I'm some kind of murderer. It was a bad joke and poor timing with the policy. That's all." "What about the contempt in your voice when you talked about me? About my stupid cooking shows and my 3 stories? That wasn't a joke. That was how you really feel." Mason leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Everyone vents about their spouse sometimes. You're telling me you've never complained about me to your friends?" There's a difference between "he leaves his socks on the floor" and "I hope she dies in a plane crash." A woman at the next table glanced over. Mason noticed and straightened up. "I love you, Scarlett. I've always loved you. I made one terrible mistake, and now you're throwing away 7 years of marriage?" I took a sip of my latte, buying time. "It's not just what you said. It's that I don't recognize you anymore. The Mason I married wouldn't have said that even as a joke. Something's changed." He looked down at the table. "Nothing's changed. I'm still me. The credit card debt? The $1,800 a month on gaming? The new friends with their fancy cars? That's all the same old Mason?" His head snapped up. "You've been investigating me?" "I've been protecting myself. There's a difference." We sat in silence for a moment. A barista called out someone's order. The espresso machine hissed. "What do you want from me, Scarlett?" Mason finally asked. "What will it take to fix this?" I'd rehearsed this moment for days, but now that it was here, I felt oddly calm. "I want a separation. 3 months minimum. You get therapy. Real therapy. Not just a session or 2. I want complete financial transparency. And I want that life insurance policy canceled." "A separation?" He looked stunned. You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious about anything in my life." "And if I refuse?" "Then I file for divorce, and those texts where you admit what you said become public record." His face hardened. "So that's it? An ultimatum?" "No, Mason. It's a boundary. One I should have set a long time ago." He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fine. We'll do it your way. Separation, therapy, financial transparency, whatever you want. It's not about what I want. It's about whether we can salvage anything from this marriage. I honestly don't know if we can." I stood up, gathering my purse. "I'll have my lawyer draw up the separation agreement." "You should get your own lawyer to review it." "Lawyers? Jesus, Scarlett, we're talking about our marriage." "No," I said quietly. "We're talking about my life, the one you joked about ending for financial gain." As I walked out, I heard him call my name, but I didn't turn around. My hands were shaking, but my resolve wasn't. For the first time in 2 weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. In my car, I sat for a moment before starting the engine. My phone buzzed with a text from Mason. "I'm sorry, I'll do whatever it takes." Too little, too late, I thought. But at least it was a start. The separation agreement was finalized 2 weeks after our coffee shop confrontation. Mason moved out of our house and into a 1-bedroom apartment downtown. I moved back into our home, my home now, at least temporarily. Walking through the front door that first night felt surreal, like entering a museum of my former life. Mason had taken only the essentials: clothes, his gaming equipment, personal items. He left a note on the kitchen counter. "I'll get the rest when we figure things out. I'm starting therapy next week." I stood in our bedroom, my bedroom, and realized I'd need to change everything. The sheets still smelled like his cologne. I stripped the bed, stuffed the linens in a garbage bag, and ordered new bedding online. Then I rearranged the furniture, moving the bed to face the window instead of the door. Small changes, but necessary ones. The first month of separation was the hardest. I'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there, then remember why. Friends took sides, some openly, others more subtly. Our couple friends mostly disappeared, uncomfortable with the new dynamic. My parents called daily, concerned but supportive. Mason's mother left tearful voicemails about working through rough patches. Jackson, surprisingly, reached out with an apology. "I should have shut down that conversation," he admitted over coffee. "It wasn't just Mason. I encouraged that kind of talk. I'm sorry." I appreciated his honesty, but kept my distance. The brothers had always brought out a certain toxicity in each other. Mason stuck to our agreement with unexpected diligence. He attended therapy weekly, sent me financial statements showing he'd cut his gaming expenses, and canceled the life insurance policy. He texted occasionally, surface-level updates about his therapy progress or questions about bill payments. I responded with equal brevity. 6 weeks in, he asked if we could meet for dinner. "Just to talk," his text read. No pressure. We met at a restaurant we'd never been to together. Neutral territory. He looked better than at the coffee shop. Cleaner, more put together, less desperate. "My therapist says I have issues with validation," he said after we ordered. "I say things to impress people, even when they're not things I believe or would ever act on." I nodded but said nothing. "That's not an excuse," he continued. "Just context. I've been doing a lot of work on why I said what I said, why I took out that policy without telling you." "And?" I prompted when he fell silent. "And I was scared. About money. About the future. We've been living beyond our means. I thought if something happened to either of us, the other would be financially ruined." "But you only insured me, not yourself." He looked down. "I know. That's the part I'm still working through. There's something broken in me, Scarlett. I'm trying to fix it." The conversation continued like that, him sharing insights from therapy, me listening skeptically. By dessert, I felt emotionally exhausted, but also strangely proud of him. He seemed to be doing the work. "I miss you," he said as we walked to our separate cars. "Every day." "I miss who I thought you were," I replied honestly. 2 months into our separation, I had dinner with Lily, who asked the question everyone had been dancing around. "Are you going to take him back?" I pushed my food around my plate. "I don't know. Some days I think maybe we can rebuild. Other days I remember what he said and feel sick." "What does your therapist say?" Lily asked. I'd started seeing someone too, Dr. Chen, a calm, insightful woman who specialized in trauma and relationships. "She says trust is like a vase. Once it's broken, you can glue it back together, but it will never be as strong in those places again. You'll always see the cracks." Lily nodded. "Do you still love him?" "Parts of him," I admitted. "But I don't know if that's enough." By month 3, we'd established a new normal. Mason came over once a week for dinner and conversation. We talked about our therapy sessions, our separate lives, occasionally reminisced about good times. He never pushed for reconciliation, which I appreciated. During one of these dinners, he brought up the insurance policy again. "I need to tell you something," he said, putting down his fork. "Something I haven't told my therapist yet." My stomach tightened. "I took out that policy when we were having problems last year. Remember when we barely spoke for weeks? I was in a dark place. I thought about leaving, but I was worried about you financially. Then I started thinking, what if I didn't have to make that choice?" "What choice?" I asked, though I feared I knew. "Between staying in an unhappy marriage and leaving you with nothing." He swallowed hard. "I never would have acted on it. But the thought was there, and that terrifies me. Who thinks that about someone they love? I sat in stunned silence. I'm telling you this because I don't want secrets between us anymore, he continued. I'm going to tell my therapist next session. I just wanted you to hear it from me first. His honesty was both horrifying and strangely comforting. The Mason I married would never have admitted something so dark, so shameful. As our 3-month separation deadline approached, Mason asked what I wanted to do next. I don't know, I said truthfully. Part of me wants to try again. Part of me thinks we should let go. I'll respect whatever you decide, he said. But I want you to know I'm still fighting for us. That night, alone in my bed, I made 2 lists, reasons to stay and reasons to leave. Both were long. Both were valid. In the morning, I texted Mason. I need more time. His reply came quickly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for what we had been, but for what we might become. 2 people who had seen the worst in each other and chosen to grow instead of break.